Hello loves, it's Amy, the color queen, and I bring to you today my Ty Lee worklog. This is basically just showing y'all how I made Ty Lee. This was originally supposed to be my 2019 Halloween costume. That didn't work out because I was busy becoming a teacher, so here it is now. Right now I am showing off how I made Ty Lee's wig. I actually followed Allison Tabitha's tutorial on how to make an updo wig. I used 2 wigs from Amazon and I just glued them together and I just followed the tutorial. I think it ended up looking pretty fantastic, and then with all the extra glue pieces that I saw, I ended up just painting over them. So yeah, that's how I made Ty Lee's wig. And the rest of this tutorial is going to be absolutely mayhem. So I start off with getting a yard of red, 2 yards of maroon, and 4 yards of pink, and then I end up not being able to find a pattern for the bodice that I wanted, so I ended up making my own. And then I actually went to work at my old workplace and spent most of that day just piecing things together, and a lot of it was just like crazy estimates and just holding it up to myself. I don't recommend that. So basically for the collar, I just made a little triangle for myself and then cut it on fold, made it inside out, top stitched it, there you go. For the belt tassels, what I did was I measured how long my pants were actually going to be and then made each section a little bit smaller and made my own patterns for that. I cut out 2 maroon pieces and 1 interfacing piece. I sewed all that together, pressed it, turned it inside out, pressed it, you know, all that good stuff, and then I added it to the belt. The belt itself was a little bit of a trial and error because I originally had snaps in it, as you can see right there, but it turned out when I was all done with the belt it actually didn't fit quite properly, even though I used my hip and waist measurements, so I ended up having to make it just a little bit smaller with Velcro. Here I am actually top stitching everything because I think it looks much neater that way, and in this clip you can also see that I was wearing Ty Lee's bracelets. The bracelets were actually one of the first things that I finished, along with Ty Lee's little hair doodad that's in her hair. Basically what I did for all 3 of those things is I took 2 strips of red, I sewed them together, turned them inside out, and then I added a top stitch directly down the middle of each of those 3 strips that I had made to give it a little more texture. And then specifically for the wrists, I added Velcro on either end so that way they just go around my wrists real easily. For the hair doodad, I just ended up sewing it to the wig. The midriff top was a lot of trial and error, mostly because of the darts. I had to go in and fix the darts like 5 or 6 times because they kept giving me pointy boob, and pointy boob is not the look we're going for here. And then I also found out that the pink that I chose was a little bit too see-through, so I ended up having to layer some more with it. So now my outfit is actually pretty well insulated. So I ended up doing the darts first, and then the top part of the sleeve, so the back and the front pieces were all together. And then I ended up French seaming the sides, which was honestly not the play because it ended up being just a little bit too tight, so I had to go back and restitch, and it was just all kinds of craziness that was happening. When I was done with the top, I realized that there needed to be some kind of waistline or something right underneath the bust because it did not look good. We'll talk about that whenever we get there because the waistline is talked about later in the finishing touches. I think this footage now is the pants portion of it because I don't really have a lot to report on pants. And this looks like the pants footage because I ran out of pink, and so I ended up having to use white instead of pink. I should clarify, that's for the inside of it, so that way the pink wasn't so see-through as we're going back through this again. And of course, I just used your 99-cent run-of-the-mill elastic pants, and then I just cropped the pants to where I needed them to be, which is like covering my knees, and then I added elastic around the ends, so it was kind of an easy project. But of course, I made it hard for myself because I ended up French seaming it all. I didn't take into account that it would make it smaller, so it ended up being a little too tight around my my bottom, and so I ended up having to take out the stitching and just stitch it normally. But since I did that, I can now move around in those pants and I can do yoga in them, and it's absolutely fabulous. In this part, I'm finishing up the ends, making a nice little hem around the edges, and then afterwards I'm going to fold it over to create that little tunnel for the elastic. And then off camera, I'm pretty sure I end up just putting the elastic in. I'm not sure how entertaining it would be to watch someone struggle to put in some elastic, so I ended up just not filming it, but I did film how I did the little tunnels, which was just a hem, and then when I was done hemming it, I folded it over. And now come on the first try-ons. This is when I realized that I needed to work on the belt a little bit, and then that's when I also realized that my pants were too tight, so I went in and I fixed them, and that's them fixed. That's when I also added the elastic around the edges. And then I went in and I added a sleeve. So next is talking about how I added sleeves. Literally, I just grabbed a short sleeve pattern from one of my random patterns that I have. I don't remember which one, sorry. And then I added a whole bunch of fabric underneath to give it that bell look. And then I just sewed it to the sleeve holes. Just put in normal sleeves in the sleeve hole. And I'm not sure what else I can say here besides, you know, adding the sleeves to the sleeve hole. Oh, I did realize that my sleeves were actually a little bit too tight, so I ended up having to put little diamond gussets underneath, like right where the armpit is. So that's a little bit embarrassing. But since I did that, I can now move my arms a whole bunch, because when I first put it on, I could only lift my arms into like a T-pose, and now I can lift my arms above my head and it's not uncomfortable. So sometimes weird diamond gusset things are the way to go, and plus you won't be able to see it unless you like did a handstand or something. And I'm letting y'all know right now, I cannot do a handstand. Oh, look at it, it's beautiful. I still haven't added the zipper to the back because we're going to talk about the waistline detail next. So what I did was I took 2 strips of pink fabric, 1 strip of interfacing, pressed them together, sewed one side together, then opened it like a little hamburger. Actually, maybe more like a Subway sandwich. And then I flipped it around so that way you couldn't see that edge. And then afterwards, I ended up actually French seaming it to the bottom of the bodice. So instead of doing my usual make a little tunnel, turn it around, and then sew it to the bodice, I ended up French seaming it to the bottom because I didn't want that raw edge bothering me as I was doing Ty Lee things, aka just random yoga poses. One of the last things I did for this costume is make the collar. What I did was I took the measurement of my neckline that I had on the bodice. I cut out 2 strips, made that Chinese collar look, sewed around the edge where the Chinese collar was, turned it inside out, and then added it to the actual neckline of the bodice. I also added interfacing to make it a little more sturdy. You don't want to do without that, and I used like the sturdy interfacing, not the soft stuff, but like the one that's like for the stiff types of fabric. And then after that, I added my zipper off camera because I think it's kind of embarrassing to put a zipper on while you're on camera. And then afterwards, I realized that I had trouble getting it on. And the reason I had trouble getting it on was because I had sewn the waistline as like the bottom of the zipper. I took out the stitching and added hook and eyes instead, so there are hook and eyes around the collar and around the waistline, so that way it all hooks together and I can still move. And the very last things that I did was I took my little red strips of fabric that I used for the little details around Tylee's pants. I basted them and added Velcro so that way they would snap together, and so that way they would move with the elastic around the edges. And then I basted the collar around the neckline, and then I was done! So congratulations, you finished watching my work log of Tylee. I hope this video helped you out with your own Tylee costume. Enjoy the rest of this video of me dorking around in my Tylee costume. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.